Canada, we have a problem.
Canada, we have a problem. Yeah, so Christine Wack, who is the Senior Vice President of Partnerships and Stakeholder Engagement for North America at IDP, wrote a great op-ed during the week around, I guess, Canada's positioning in the marketplace. And well, we asked Australians who have moved to One Nation from the coalition as to why they've done that. The majority have moved over because they think the two-party system is broken, to your point, Rob, that the economy is not working for them and they want to burn the place down. Only 13 to 17% have done so because of immigration.
G'day and welcome to Global Horizons. I'm your host, Rob Malicki, coming to you today from Garigal in Sydney.
And g'day, I'm Dirk Mulder, CEO and founder of the Koala News. I'm coming to you from the other side of town in Durrig country. How you going today, Rob?
Mate, staying dry. I think that's the flavour for the day, isn't it? Because
absolutely.
Just before we hit record, we were having a little bit of a natter, and yeah, we're both kind of under the rain where we are here in Sydney today.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the clouds moving from west to east, mate, it's throwing it down here out west. So you've got a bit more of it to endure.
I will stay inside and dry. And I've got my nice big winter jumper on for the first time this year. So it's one of those days, just warm and dry inside. It's not a bad thing. Knock off a bit of work.
Mate, you'll be in the kitchen making a Milo before you know it.
There is definitely Milo on the cards for today. Absolutely true, sir. So for those people who've been listening along for the last couple of months, you know that we've been putting a pin in where we are time-wise by talking about petrol prices. Dirk, very generous of you to just put the petrol prices straight into the run sheet here. That helps me having to go and look it up on my petrol app.
I don't know what it's like on the northern beaches, but yeah.
Mate, I think we can almost give up on this right now because it's back to $1.69 according to your, on sale in Penrith.
Yeah, so I made, as I was doing the run sheet, I clicked open my New South Wales government petrol app, and the majority is probably 187.9 around the area, but there was one discount that I saw, a few kilometres away that was 169.1. So it seems to be, if I can say, it's since we've been doing it, it's been relatively consistent.
It's basically been since we started talking about petrol prices that petrol prices have gone back to normal.
Or with a wee lucky charm, Rob. The wee lucky charm.
It's you and me, Dirk. How about we don't? I was just about to say, why don't we drop petrol prices out of the start of the run sheet? But you know exactly what will happen then. They'll start going back up again. So maybe we just keep them in there for now, and everybody hopes that maybe the Strait of Hormuz opens anyway. But anyway, we do digress, or I digress at least. The other timestamp, of course, it is NAFSA week. When was your last NAFSA, Dirk? How long's it been since you've been to the mighty USA for a NAFSA conference?
Yeah, it's been a few years. I was coming in, when we talk about NAFSA, this time of the year always is a little bit unsettling because I did so many of them in a period. So I've actually done 9 in total, but it's been a while since my last one. Yeah. And I've been, every year NAFSA comes around and I go, I'd love to make this my 10th. But yeah, and it's such a great week. I mean, it's obviously Memorial Day in the United States, so there's a real buzz about, and for those people that are familiar with the United States, summer essentially begins on Memorial Day, and there's just such a buzz in the air wherever you tend to be, unless you're in one of the really northern states where it's still a bit cool. But for most of the United States, the weather's getting better, people are out. It signals that you can get off, stop wearing your dark clothes and start bringing out your light pastels. And there's a real buzz in the air. That's just on the social side of things, let alone, NAFSA's probably the biggest gig in town. If you think globally, I think, the last couple of years, I think maybe last year was a little bit down, but, they generally get around 9,500 people to this event. So anyone who's anyone in international education globally tends to be there. And it'll be interesting to see what the attendance is like this year, given everything that's going on in the world. We talk about petrol prices, but that also affects jet fuel prices and all the things that sit around that. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see by the end of the week how many people have actually registered and how the week has gone, just from a feeling wise being on the conference floor.
Yeah, I'll definitely give it a FOMO now. Like I went to NAFSA for many years for AIM Overseas, our previous business, and then towards the end of like just pre-COVID, it was mostly Maureen, my wife and business partner, who was doing those conferences. So I hadn't been for a couple of years even pre-COVID. So yeah, it's actually probably getting close to like 8 or 9 years that I haven't been for one. I do get FOMO every time I see like LinkedIn lights up with all of the posts and all of the colleagues, and you're like, oh, I'd love to.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you're at NAFSA this week, screw you. We wish we could be there with you too, enjoying a glass of wine instead of podcasting from miserable Sydney.
That's it. Mate, before we get on the news, I want to touch on you've now, the last 2 episodes, I think, we've spoken a little bit about your initiative through Choose Your Uni.
Oh, yeah.
Mate, how did it's now finished, the big online expo. Tell us about it. How'd it go?
Yeah, mate, thanks for that. Yeah, look, huge. Where we're up to, technically, it's still running until this Sunday, but like all the sessions finished up about 8 days ago, 10 days ago. It was huge. Like I think at the moment we're at about 5,600 registrations, so people can still register now and up until Sunday.
Yep.
So yeah, like 5,600 registrations. I had a quick look at numbers, and it's like thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of watch time, which is great. But one of the things we didn't, because we were literally building this plane as we were flying it, so one of the things that I didn't manage to get done before the event was like a unified analytics dashboard. That'll be on the cards for next year. So unfortunately, like all the analytics kind of spread across Google and the streaming platform and Vimeo and all these other platforms. So it's going to be actually a mission to actually pull all that together. But initial results, like super, super good, like way in excess of expectations. I think the 5,600 regos, but we had 13,000 unique visitors during Expo Week itself, because you didn't have to register to watch sessions. So, mate, those are massive numbers, nuts numbers. So, yeah, next year will be even bigger and even more impactful. We've already started planning it. Yeah.
I don't mind saying I logged on to a couple of the sessions that I saw via LinkedIn, and one that I probably sat through the most was actually the University of New England. And just because I'm familiar with the place, I've spent quite a bit of time in Armidale over the years. And mate, I've got to say, you did a really, really good job at blending what essentially is a presentation on, hey, here's the university, one that we're all probably familiar with a really good conversation that streams through it, and you go off on little tangents, and it I mean, I know the whole point of this is to be a bit different, but I think you really achieve that because you got the presenter, I've forgotten the nice lady's name, but you got to, talking about side stories and it was really great little anecdotes all the way through it. And I thought it was really compelling watching. And again, for someone who knows the place fairly well, you go, oh yeah, that's a really pertinent point. And it's something that you probably wouldn't get from a stock standard presentation, or even something that you might, even if you go to an in-person careers event, that you would get by somebody standing up on stage and rattling off that 20 slide presentation. So well done, mate.
Thank you. And look, I guess that was the point, and there are going to be some learnings for some of the institutions out of it, because I've obviously seen presentations from a lot of institutions now, and some really, really landed well, like those kind of conversations that you're talking about. And some you kind of like stock standard webinar, straight delivery, little bit boring, to be honest. So, I think part of what I really want to work on for next year is working with the individual presenters and institutions to level up that quality of content, because it just takes a bit of energy, right? It's a bit of energy and a bit of enthusiasm. Like, let's point out this is different and that's different, and make it a little bit more engaging. But of course, like when you do presentations day in, day out, like you can sort of get the vibe that some people are a little bit transactional there. So definitely working on that for next year. But yeah, overall, like big successful event, mate. So thank you for calling that out again. And maybe with that, we move on to Canada. Canada is our starting point, straight on the plane overseas.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Canada, we have a problem.
Canada, we have a problem. Yeah, so Christine Wack, who is the Senior Vice President of Partnerships and Stakeholder Engagement for North America at IDP, wrote a great op-ed during the week around, I guess, Canada's positioning in the marketplace. And it resonated with me because it's probably not too dissimilar to where we are in Australia. Essentially, what it talks about is, it's obviously on the back of IDP's release of Emerging Futures 9 research, and what it can say, and I'll just read this line because I think it's pertinent, it sets the scene. What it does is confirm that today's prospective international students are shopping for employability, institutional quality, safety, and policy clarity in that order. And that policy clarity, as it turns out, moves to demand faster than the policy itself. And so I think if you look at that through the Australian lens, that's very much what came out of the Emerging Futures for Australia, was around policy, around visa clarity, around all of those things. So fascinating to see an op-ed from Canada that you can really, really engage with. What I find really interesting about this, and I'm going to put my nerdy international relations hat on at the moment, is Prime Minister Carney in Canada has, over the last few months, and for those that have been keeping up with the news, I think it was the G7 or there was one of those major kind of multilateral forums where he gave an amazing speech about how the rules of the world order are changing at the moment. And he really made a call out to say those middle powers, be that Canada, Australia, and similar kind of economies, need to start working together to essentially shield itself from some of these larger powers that might not be as consistent as what they have been. And we can't rely on that anymore. So I think we have spoken about this before. One of the things that came out of Christine's op-ed was around how Canada's wanting to position itself for human resource development and the brightest minds in the world in attracting human capital. And when you then combine that with current policy settings in Canada, they don't necessarily sit right. So her view is that Canada's got a great product, they've got a great message, but it's now time to back it up. And I feel like in many ways that's the similar sort of situation in Australia. So if we think about, while there is a migration discussion going on, at the same time, and I go to the budget discussions that the Treasurer had, we're now looking at bringing in skilled migrants into construction industries and into other areas, but I don't think we're seeing the long game. And it speaks to, I guess, Christine's point, where I think, of all the countries in the world, I think Australia and Canada have a really solid foundation for attracting global capital. It's a great place to live. We've got would have said a once thriving economy. We're probably, a little bit at the moment, given all the discussion that's going on around capital gains tax and fringe benefits and investment and all those sorts of things. We'll get through this and we will continue to have a place that people want to come to, they want to invest in. But what are we doing about structurally taking advantage of that? And again, I've always said the international education system is one that we should incentivize. We should be encouraging people to be trained here, right? Like, not just bring your skills from overseas, but actually be trained here. Get to understand how the country works. So by the time you graduate, you're off running. There's no, we'll go over there for a year and check it out. People know that they want to be here and they're willing to commit. Where it falls down is that commitment to the industry. So there's lots of sectors that have been incentivised over time through skilled migration points, et cetera. But a lot of the students will end up going and studying those programs, but not end up in the sector. So I think if we can figure that out, similarly to what Christine's point is in Canada, we should be doing a lot better than what we are in this, and really being able to moderate and filter and turn off and on more readily the skilled occupations that we need in this country. And so we're not left with skills voids like we've been seeing and are seeing presently.
Yeah, very interesting. And talking about turning things on and off and on and favourites and the like, I think, Canberra's latest move reveals who in international education it really favours, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So last week, Julian Hill signed a piece of legislation? Essentially, a legislative instrument is probably the best word, which essentially puts a 12-month freeze on new CRICOS applications to the National Vet Regulator, ASQA, as well as, so that's for new colleges, as well as new programs in the vet space. So there's a few exceptions around that, and I probably won't go into them all now, but essentially, if there's a superseded course and you want to update it, that's okay. And there's a few things around that. Now, the interesting thing, and this is what speaks volumes, is that there are a bunch of exemptions, and essentially they're government schools, state-owned TAFEs and public universities, and classified as Table A providers, which leaves... So if you think about all of those, which basically leaves the private vet sector and standalone ELICOS are the ones that are being targeted by this. Mate, I don't know what you think, but I mean, a moratorium essentially on innovation in one area of the sector is just, I don't know. It's startling to me. I know that there is a view out there that says that we've probably got that potentially we've got too many private vet providers. But mate, I tell you, there's the guys that are in there at the moment and the girls that are in there at the moment are absolutely clinging to life. And This is just another area. And then you put that across essentially what we just spoke about in terms of, trying to incentivize innovation and trying to incentivize, right? It's often the private vet sector which is the most responsive to those incentives, right? Because it's market based. So if you were to think about a private vet college wanting to put on a construction program, well, if you wanted to put that up right now, wait 12 months. So it feels like I don't want to say cutting our nose off to spite our face, but it feels a bit that way. And if you look at the numbers across the vet sector, I mean, TAFE is marginal compared to the private vet sector when it comes to vet students. So while they've been given an exemption out of this, I can't see, well, unless something majorly changes, there's going to have to be a massive spike in interest in vet TAFE internationally. otherwise, mate, we're just strangling the private vet sector.
Yeah, it's like a little bit anti-competitive, isn't it? Having, we're just going to exempt the government-owned institutions and let the privates do their own, or not permit them to play in the game. In particular, I guess that's concerning in areas where we have demonstrated workforce shortages. So, in aged care, in nursing, in fill in the blank construction, like there's a dozen of them, where you would just be thinking that more capacity a good thing for the country. But clearly this just comes back to the migration thing. Like they're just looking wherever they can potentially cap numbers just to stop more applications and take a bit of heat out of that part of the system. Whilst perhaps on the upside, redirecting people into the government-owned institutions. And look, can I just put a little caveat under that too? The government is all of us. So if we have more students going to TAFE, well, it's not necessarily a bad thing because that's bringing revenue into the public system. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I don't know, it's a little bit anti-competitive too.
No, that's right. And the minister put out the assistant minister put out obviously a press release with it. And the two rationales provided for this change was one around integrity, and the Nixon review was once again rolled out for that. Now, I don't know about for those people who follow this closely. The Nixon review was never about wholesale integrity measures. There were two major recommendations in this space, and neither one of them said capping private or doing what this is doing. And the second was around the regulator ASQA having too many applications in front of them and not being able to do their job actually in the integrity space, which I find surprising given the fact that they had a massive funding injection 12 to 18 months ago. I have something inside of me that it's almost like a red light alarm bell that goes off when your government says your regulator's not funded, do its job, mate. There's massive problems there.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, it's going back a little while now, but I mean, ASQA, Australian Skills and Quality Agency, is that right? Yeah, ASQA. They basically had the power to go and shut down all these dodgy providers anyway. They just hadn't been pretty much doing their job. That's what I've sort of heard.
Well,
and
there's
so
there's been a number of press releases, right? So I think, and we've spoken about this probably 3 or 4 episodes back, but 30,000 qualifications cancelled, 14 providers put out of business. Only one of them actually was CRICOS registered, which means being able to deliver to international students. And the rationale for them being shut down had nothing to do with their international program. So I just find this really, really difficult. And I think if anything, and I'll try and keep the rest of the politics out of it, but if you think about the memes that are going on at the moment around capital gains tax, and there was a Liberal senator kicked out of the chamber yesterday for calling Labor liars and refusing to take it back. But is the electorate now catching up to? And I don't want to blatantly come out and say they're lies, but certainly a bit of gandering going on around some of these things, because it's, as we've been talking about for quite some time, the policy that's being enacted and the rationale for it on multiple, and I would say 98% of the time, they just don't line up. And maybe the rest of the electorate and the mass media. I mean, I've seen stories on the mass media about digging into some of the data that Labor are referencing now, and it's not stacking up. And so maybe they're now starting to get called out a little bit more on some of the things that are going on. And maybe they've had it a bit too easy.
Maybe it's just politics as usual, man. Like I feel like we keep hearing the same. It's been that way for decades, which is why people are disgruntled and are looking at the sort of fringe and One Nation, the protest party, because they're like, well, I'm sick of the rest of this crap and sick of being told one thing and then the opposite happens. And not picking out one side of politics. That's across both sides of politics for since a long time. And so people are disgruntled with that. And therein lies some risk, right? It's like when people are jaded with the integrity of the system, then they're more likely to vote out on the fringe, even if it's not necessarily something they agree with. And maybe that sort of segues into our next story.
Just before we move on, I want to make one more point on this, because I'm doing some research at the moment for a presentation that I'm giving in a couple of weeks' time, and I found a really interesting, and if anyone wants to Google this, Google it, because I think it's a fascinating conversation. It's called the 7 a.m. podcast, and there's a guy called Cos Samaras, who's the director of strategy and analytics at the Redbridge Group. Redbridge Group does polling. So this guy's, right on the cusp of these things. And if I can, I'm just going to read this out because I think this is really important. This is actually my slide. He said, I think we're now seeing the opposition desperate to survive, and they think that immigration is the only thing that's going to help them. They fail to understand, and the reason that they are in this terrible situation is because they've taken their eye off representing working class conservative Australians who have voted for them for many years. They always resort to immigration because it's easy. They think that if they try to outperform Pauline Hanson on that, it might bring back some of their votes. Well, we ask Australians who have moved to One Nation from the coalition as to why they've done that. The majority have moved over because they think the two-party system is broken, to your point, Rob.
Yeah.
That the economy is not working for them and they want to burn the place down. Only 13 to 17% have done so because of immigration. So when you start, exactly to your point, people are looking for other options because the two-party system, they're not seeing themselves reflected in Labor or Liberal or the Nationals at the moment. And, just the last few days of bickering in Parliament, you see why, because mate, they've obviously got their attention on themselves rather than on the electorate.
On the people. We've been seeing it for a while now, like with all of the, the rise of the teal movement, the teal independence, and that's becoming more and more significant. So, watch this space, and maybe like moving on to this, staying in the sort of politics side of international education, if you like. But the coalition, of course, delivered its budget reply, and unsurprisingly, like migration, a big part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you say, Angus Taylor delivered his budget reply speech, and Tracy Harris wrote this one up. So thank you to Tracy. While international students weren't explicitly mentioned in the speech, they do. It obviously, migration figured very prominently. They want to cut that back, and it'll be the biggest cuts in immigration in Australia's history if they were to win the next election, according to Taylor. And it just goes to show, just on the back of, what Cos was saying, I think the Libs are really struggling in this space. And it's been interesting because this was, when he delivered this, so we obviously go on a fortnightly basis. This would have been a few days after our last podcast. So it's been probably a week and a half since it was delivered. And some of the backlash in the media has actually been really interesting. There's been a Liberal senator who's come out and spoken against Taylor around this, and there just seems to be a lot more conjecture in the media now as to, so let me rephrase this a different way. Some of the data that's now coming out is questioning whether migrants are actually the issue within the housing area, for a start. Some of the pressure around this, but from a political point of view, there are so many first-generation Australians that are here, that have arrived, that are now voters. Is this really the smartest political tool, talking to anti-immigration, when you're actually cutting off a whole voting block within that? And look, I'm not a pollster, I'm certainly not a political strategist, but one would think in the urban areas of particularly Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth, that the migrant vote would be one that is very important, and that the nomenclature that you use around this needs to be very carefully considered. And I think anyone in this space, I would say any political pundit would say, you don't lock down something that is fringe, if I can put it that way. So you don't lock in a policy with rhetoric that you can't walk back from if you move. But it seems like that's what the Liberals are doing. They're going down this path of really hard migration. And there's something inside me that says in a couple of months' time, watch out, because somebody's going to wake up and realise they've just lost a whole bunch of more seats in urban areas because first-generation Australians have gone, you know what, that's not who I am, and that's not what I'm about. And yes, we don't necessarily want a big Australia, but migration's actually not a bad thing. So where do we sit in all of this? And I think this is going to be a really interesting political strategy to watch over the next 6 months, because there's something inside me that says, this isn't over. I think there's going to be some alternate views come out, and we'll see where it lands.
I'm sure as it gets closer to the next election, which still isn't due for another 20 months or something like that, still quite a while away. So I'm sure as that gets closer and the pressure ramps up on the coalition from One Nation, and doesn't look like that sort of anger is going to subside easily, then then I think that pressure becomes more intense. And that, given the way they're heading right now, that probably pushes them even further into this camp around, anti-migration and what have you. And ladies and gentlemen listening, like I know you're sort of thinking, what's this got to do with international education? Well, quite a lot, because when it comes to the net overseas migration figure, this is kind of wrapped up in that whole debate. So it does affect us in quite a significant way. And interestingly, they didn't put a specific number on net overseas migration, did they, Dirk?
The Libs did not. No, mate.
The coalition, that is, in their budget report.
Yeah. So they wouldn't be
the biggest cut ever, but we'll tell you later. We'll tell you later. Just don't ask, but we'll tell you later what it's all about.
That's it.
Mm.
But they did say...
But it's going to be big. It's going to be big.
Going to be big. I'm just trying to think. So he did mention a figure of around 150. So, and it would be well below 2,000. But again, I think there's probably some wiggle room there around, what's appropriate at the time, et cetera, et cetera. Mate, the big one about NOM, and I come back to it, and, there's been a lot of work. I want to do a little bit more work on it, but on working holiday visas and the explosion of that area. And again, I think I've said it before, there's a big trade deal that's just been done with Europe, which will allow Australians, and, it's certainly being talked about very positively here in Australia about for the opportunity for young Australians to go and work in Europe. What does that mean on the back end of that? Young Europeans can come and work here, and that's only going to put more pressure on the NOM, not less. So, mate, it just feels like the policy levers just aren't all moving in one way at the moment. There just seem to be all this rhetoric, and when you scratch the surface, and again, maybe this is the two-party problem, is that once you scratch the surface, the rhetoric around policy and the policy directions just keep falling down left, right, and centre.
Yeah. And as we know, eventually that hits the real economy. If we're talking about international ed contributing 50 billion plus to the national economy, you start to cut that, which has already been done. That eventually hits real numbers over time. So, yeah, you end up with holes that need to be filled in other ways. Maybe we move on, and we're back onto IDP expanding its China footprint. So that's a bit of a hard left turn, folks. I'm just conscious that we've been talking politics. Let's get back to our bread and butter.
Yeah, so no, Rob, you're absolutely right. So during earlier in the week, they officially opened their IELTS centre in Chengdu, which is fantastic for IDP. From my understanding, the British Council predominantly did IELTS in China. So for IDP as a company, this is a really, really good thing. It has been, my understanding is it has been operating for about a month or so. Michael Goodine made a comment on my LinkedIn around that, so shout out to Michael. But from a strategic direction point of view, this is a really positive thing for IDP and for IELTS. So if they can continue to expand in China, then that will mean good things for IDP and IELTS.
Yeah, I guess considering headwinds just about everywhere, right? So anything that makes things sort of easier for students is going to be a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, for a company that, again, you think about the top 4 destinations all contracting, and IDP's felt the brunt of that. Share price has been up and down and maybe down a bit more, and then up a little bit and then down again. So for them to be able to be pivoting, I know there's been some work in the background about doing that pivoting. To start seeing those pivots now come to market is a really positive thing for them. And that'll as the big 4 do come back at some point, whether it's this year, next year, in 5 years' time, IDP will be well placed to be able to capitalise on the pivots that they're doing now and the expansion that they're working on.
Yeah, and that's interesting, isn't it? Because obviously large organisations takes a long time to turn that ship around, or to innovate is much harder within a big organisation than within a small and more nimble one. So I think that's a credit to the organisation to be, making new initiatives and trying to do things new and different where it can.
Absolutely.
And so moving on, this is a nice story here as well around Melbourne tradition of giving. The Tertiary Scholarship Fund launches the 2026 Awards for Excellence.
Yeah, and look, when I do the run sheet, I mean, for those that are listening, you tend to try and finish on a high note. So this is our final story of the podcast. Mate, this one came in from left field, actually. I'd never heard of it before. I didn't know anything about it. Got a press release on it. Spoke to the PR person. Her name's Karen. She's lovely. Thought, you know what, this is actually really, really good. So the genesis of this is there's a gentleman in Melbourne who apparently, if you are a Melbourneite, is it a Melbourneite? Is that what you'd say? A Melbourne-centric person?
Melburnian.
Melburnian, yes. Mr. Yin Choi Lam, and he is the restaurateur of the Mekong restaurant, which is on Spencer Street. Vietnamese migrant, and apparently has done. I've never heard of Mekong restaurant. I'm a Sydney sider who spent 20 years in Perth. So, but for those in Melbourne, apparently it's a very popular restaurant. He started a fund back in 2005, and over the years has donated or given away or set up scholarships of around $200,000. And his idea is to give back through education. And again, if there was more of, I don't want to say more of this, but these sorts of things need to be celebrated. And so, when this came through, I thought, that's amazing. So they had a little function at the Melbourne Town Hall earlier this week, and yeah, all really, really good. Applications are open until the 31st of August, I believe. And if you jump onto the Koala News, you can find a link. We'll get you to that area. So, $15,000 this year across the main category, and there's a couple of other categories there as well. So, congratulations on what is just, a rounded, nice story with what seems to be, I've never met the man, but there's a little video and I've seen some photos. He just seems like a really nice bloke. Like the smile, as I said to Karen in our correspondence, his smile just seems infectious, and he just seems really happy to be in the position to be able to give back. So congratulations to Mr. Lam, congratulations to the City of Melbourne. Let's hope that and congratulations to whoever is awarded. And I believe the award ceremony will be in October.
Yeah, I love that, mate. Like, 15 grand is not negligible. It's also not millions, right? Like, I just think it's such a great example that you don't, it doesn't have to be millions of dollars on the table, hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table to actually make a difference in people's lives and to create positive change in the world. So, I applaud that. I think that's a great thing that, you still have to set up the structure and, deal with all the applications and everything like that. So it's not a negligible undertaking in order to create change in the world. Little aside, my little contribution to the world in that regard is anytime, somebody puts something up on LinkedIn and they're doing a fun run or, they're raising money for XYZ, I always give $30,
Nice.
My philosophy is like, just don't walk past somebody trying to do good that's just asking for a small contribution. It's so easy. $30, you're not going to miss it. But for that person that's out there doing that thing, just knowing that people in their network are getting behind them, supporting them makes a difference. So I would implore listeners, if you're doing that, just never walk past that call out for $20 or $15 or $100 or whatever it is that you can give. And if you do it every single time, in fact, I reckon it gives you a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling that you're actually helping out not only the world, but the people in your network. And that comes back in better ways than you might expect. So, yeah,
I'm into that. Agreed.
Respect to the people doing good stuff in the world, Dirk. That's I think a nice note to end on.
Absolutely, mate. Before you wrap it up, can I just put a little date stamp on this? Neil Danaher passed away yesterday, and I have no affiliation to motor neurones disease. I became LinkedIn friends with Neil when he was first diagnosed. And the reason was he actually went to my old school, and I never knew it. And I saw the write up when he was first diagnosed, and I went, "Oh my God, he went to St. Pat's Goulburn. That's incredible." And for that reason, I think I've watched his journey. And mate, I don't mind saying I had a few tears in my eyes yesterday when I saw the news, because for someone who has been dealt a pretty freaking bad hand in life, mate, that guy stood up and took it on the chin and said, "Bugger you, I'm going to do the best I can." And I believe Victoria's offering a state funeral for him. No one more deserved. And I just want to shout out to, if anyone, connections know his family, shout out to his family, wish them all the best, and congratulate Neil on a life that was a difficult one, but well lived, and is a testament to humanity.
You know what I'm going to do, Dirk? Having just done my little rant about don't walk past the opportunity to do good, I'm going to get on Motor Neurone Australia, like whatever the association is. I'm going to donate $30 right now just to that, because honestly, that is a terrifying disease, and they are getting close. Like I've followed some of the research in that they are getting closer to figuring that one out. Listeners, if you want to do a little bit of good in the world, MND Australia or whatever the national association is that you can donate to, go do that right now, and you'll feel better about yourself and contributing to, like, literally that one of the scariest things out there, I reckon. So, like, let's help squash that one, and then we've all done some good in the world.
Absolutely.
And maybe with that, Dirk, I'm going to let you get back to your wet, rainy Sydney
Thank
afternoon.
you.
I'm going to go have a coffee. Actually, what else you got coming up in the next little while? You heading anywhere, doing anything major, any events, anything like that?
Yeah, so mate, the next month is a really busy one. Next week I'm up in Brisbane, and the ITECA conference is on. So I think I'm giving a little presentation there, as well as facilitating a fireside chat between Felix Perry, who's the CEO of ITECA, and Ian Aird, the CEO of English Australia. So I'm looking forward to that. Mate, I come back. I've got a few days back in Sydney, and then I head up to Darwin and study NT. I've got their international forum on, so speaking at that, and head over to Perth, where I'm doing a little bit of consulting and helping the Australia Africa Awards program. Perth to Melbourne, and working with, again, the South Asia program, and helping them out with looking after a delegation that's coming in from Bangladesh. So that'll be Melbourne, Brisbane, and then Sydney. So I'm on the road for about 3 weeks for that.
Yeah, wow.
So it's going to be a busy week, busy few weeks.
So next episode, we won't have Dirk Mulder from Durrag country. We're going to have Dirk Mulder from somewhere else.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
Absolutely.
Oh, you know what? So just speaking of that, I love that now that, when you travel, like it's really become a thing. People talk about the country that they're on. And I just think, the way we talk about things does make a meaningful difference. And I really believe that just the fact that, you're in a place and you acknowledge you're on Combermary country, and you're like, it just becomes part of the psyche, and that those kind of small changes add up over time and can lead to meaningful change. Just like giving your $50 to MND Australia. I've looked it up, ladies and gentlemen. $50 is all it takes you. mndaustralia.org.au. Well, mate, good luck for your travels around Australia. I look forward to reconnecting in a couple of weeks with the next news episode. And ladies and gentlemen, as you know, thekoalanews.com is your source of truth and updates for everything Australian international education and beyond. Make sure you do that. And if you're not yet doing so, jump on LinkedIn and hit follow on the Koala News as well. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time for the next news episode. Thanks as always, Dirk. Great to chat.
Excellent. Thanks, Rob. Really appreciate it.
If you've enjoyed this episode of the Global Horizons podcast, consider subscribing to our newsletter. Search for Global Horizons podcast and then just pop in your email address, and that way you will never miss out on all of the critical international education news that you need to stay up to date with. This episode has been produced on Garigal land in Sydney. Our video and audio editor is Len Zamora, and I'm your host, Rob Malicki. Have an awesome day. See you in the next episode.